how's everybody doing out there? Well, welcome to day 27 of Corona Online School. So, hopefully, everybody had a nice Thanksgiving break and is all refreshed and ready to go to finish up these last 2 weeks of the semester. So, today we're actually finishing up the last unit for the semester. So, let's jump right in. And so, we're talking about ratios, proportions, and percents today. So, first thing, this is kind of a trick example here. So Il Forno has a small pizza that's a 10-inch pizza and a large pizza that's a 20-inch pizza. What would be your guess for how much bigger the larger pizza is compared to the smaller pizza? So a lot of you right now are probably jumping out that it's twice as big because if you look, one's 10 inches and one's 20 inches. So what you have to be careful of with proportions is because in this case we're talking about the area. So if we looked at the area of each of these, so a 10-inch pizza would have a radius of 5. So it'd be 5 squared times pi. And then the 20-inch pizza would have a 10-inch radius, so it'd be 10 squared times pi. So in this case we get 25 pi, 100 pi. So now we can actually take this proportion. So we couldn't take it off of just the 10 and the 20 because that didn't give us any indication about the area, which is what we're talking about here. So in this case, if we do 100 pi divided by 25 pi, we see that we get 4. So it turns out instead of being twice as big, it's actually 4 times as big in this case. All right, so now that we've talked a little bit with a bad example about ratio, so let's talk about, so if a and b are real numbers, b not equal to 0, the ratio of a to b is the quotient a over b. So technically it's just a fraction is all we're looking at when we talk about a ratio. But it doesn't always have to be written as a fraction. So obviously the way we wrote that is one of the most common ways to write a ratio is a over b. So another way you can do it is you can actually write it as a colon b, or you can write it as a to b in this case. So, but for us, since we're going to be using this mostly for doing math, we'll be usually using the a over b form. All right, so here's a nice little example I had just in case we were in class, but obviously we're not in class. So, but basically I wanted you to go through and just kind of practice figuring out the different ratios of what to what and stuff like that. So we won't worry about that since we're not in class, but and so proportions are where we're trying to compare two things. So this will be two fractions that we set equal to each other and we try to compare them together. So in this case, if a over b and c over d are two ratios and a over b equals c over d, then this equality is called a proportion. So basically this would be another way of thinking about equivalent fractions. So this is what I showed you when we were trying to compare two fractions that were equivalent. And so if we cross multiply, so a times d has to equal b times c in this case. So with this one, we want to determine whether the two ratios are proportional. So all you want to do is just cross multiply these guys and see if they actually equal each other. So 72 times 10 is 720. And so in this case, I don't know they're equal at the moment, so I'm going to put a little question mark in between. And then 12 times 60 is also 720. So in this case, these two ratios are proportional in this case. So I've got some for you guys to practice on. So pause the video at this point. You guys work on practice 2. Make sure you can check to see whether things are proportional or not. And then from there, what we want to do is go into how to solve proportion problems, trying to fill in that missing x. All right, so hopefully everybody did a good job on those comparing to see whether they're proportional or not. So solving for x is exactly the same thing. So what we're going to do is first cross multiply these equations. So 4x equals 120. And then this turns that into a nice one-step equation where we want to solve for x. So it's always going to be, like in this case, like a multiply. So to get rid of x, or to give x by itself, we just want to divide both sides by 4. So in this case, we get x equals 30. So again, I've got practice 3 for you guys to work on. So go ahead, do the same thing. Pause the video at this point, cross multiply, solve for x. And then when you're done, we'll come back and we'll look at some story problems. So these are exactly the same idea. You should be able to set these up as 2 ratios, cross multiply to solve. So I'll leave these word problems for you guys to work on. If you get stuck on any of them or you have any questions or anything like that, just let me know. Otherwise, when you're done this, come on back to the 7.4 video.